All right. Well, I'm super excited to be here. Every year, Joe, Aaron, Kip, Dave, Sonny, they do a phenomenal job. So let's give them one more hand for the ng-conf organizers. So, yeah, I do a lot of these 60-ish minutes because of the first Angular one I did, and Dave just said, hey, you know, I need a few minutes back, so who knows, this might not even be 20-ish minutes, but it might be like 5 or something, but we are here to talk about TypeScript a little bit. How many are already using TypeScript out there? Okay, quite a few, but not that many overall. We have a pretty good crowd here. So I'm a huge fan of TypeScript. I was one of the kind of people that when it first came out, I said, hey, this looks awesome. I didn't jump into it, but I said, this looks pretty awesome. And as I jumped in, you know, I started blogging about it a little bit and going into those types of things. And as applications grew bigger and bigger and bigger, and we got more and more thousands of lines of code, I quickly realized, hey, this actually can be very, very cool. So what I'm going to talk about here is what are some of the secret weapons of TypeScript that you can use in your applications. And for those of you building, whether it's 100 lines or many, many thousands or more, how can you build these applications in a way that you can catch issues early on? All right, so we're going to talk about types, tooling, interfaces, generics, and we're going to wrap up with the future today and kind of how that works. Now, if you're new to TypeScript, just a real quick overview here. You can actually take your ES5 code today and plug that in to this TypeScript compiler that we're going to look at here. And what it will do for you is instantly tell you you screwed up. Because it will catch errors that, quite honestly, you just wouldn't catch otherwise, especially in larger apps. So TypeScript is a superset of JavaScript. A lot of people think, oh, it's its own language. No, it's actually not. It's built on top of ES5, has, of course, excellent ES6 support or ES 2015, and even some of the new stuff. Decorators, for instance, we're going to talk about here. And so TypeScript is really a big picture way of, hey, I want to leverage the future today. I want to also get these benefits we're going to talk about and use these as a secret weapon. Now, before, about a month ago, I emailed the Angular team. And I said, hey, what's your favorite TypeScript feature? And I got a lot of good responses, but Misko gave, I thought, a really good one. He said, my favorite feature is that the types system that TypeScript provides kind of mimics the actual JS spec and Commons JS spec. And, you know, in a nutshell, it's very natural to use. And I thought, you know, I totally agree. It's awesome once you get the hang of it. Last night, I asked my buddy John Papa, we were talking, and I said, what's your favorite feature? He was a little more to the point. He said, if you screw up, it'll tell you. It wasn't exactly those words, but it's a family show, so we're going to bleep that out. But let's talk about type support real quick. So if I run off to the TypeScript playground, you can go to typescriptlang.org to get to this and then click on Playground. I have a really simple example here. You'll see this ad. And you'll notice on the right the phenomenal compiled version, right? Very different. No. Okay, but a real simple example with types here is that I can come in now and we can come and let's say that X and Y here needs to be a number and Y needs to be a number. Well, you can see right off the bat, it's already caught this issue that we have. And so you'll see this argument type string is not assignable. Okay, you know, that's pretty basic. I don't know that I'm totally like, hey, that's just phenomenal. You just convinced me to move over to this. But you can actually do quite a bit more with the type support. So you have primitive types. You have your strings and numbers and arrays and booleans and things like that. You can mark things as any. It could be anything. But what's really cool is the custom type. So we're going to talk more about that in just a moment here. So here's an example. Age is a string. We have a number. Something needs to be marked as a Boolean. But notice this accessories here. Well, this is saying that this is called a union type. And this allows us to say accessories, you can pass me a string, or if you want, you can pass me a string array. So this comes up a lot, actually, especially if you're building reusable components, where you want them to be able to pass different things in more of a flexible way. Now that bottom one is a custom one. Now interfaces are something we're going to talk about in a moment, something I really like. And you do use interfaces, I find, a lot. In fact, the framework, Angular 2, uses it a lot with your applications. We're going to talk about that in just a bit here, a little bit more. So why use types? Well, I showed an example in the playground. When it generates the code, though, of course, the number that you see here, they go out. Obviously, ES5, for instance, doesn't support this. Okay, so if we did this in our component, and I have an ng on init, and I say, hey, I want to update this total with the actual value from the add, and I, accidentally screw up here, you're going to know right away. Now, that's a very simple example, obviously. All right, so let's talk about where it can be a little more useful, though. So, tooling support. One of the really cool things with TypeScript is because we can be specific about the types we're working with. How many have called into a promise to get that resolution and get the data and been like, man, what the heck am I getting back? And then you got to go look up what's the schema for the JSON and all that. Well, with the nice IntelliSense we can get in different editors, and it's not just one. It's, WebStorm has some awesome support now. VS Code, Atom, they have some really nice support now built in. But this one is showing me that I can get back an observable. Okay, and I'm going to make this a little better, though. We're going to talk about that in a moment. Here's one as I type. Notice response dot. And I'm able to get to very specific information about what am I going to get back out of this. And so John mentioned some code snips this morning. I have some as well. They're very similar, different prefixes that I use to do a lot of this stuff. And so when it comes to TypeScript, you really don't have to type as much. Now, some of the cool features, code help, IntelliSense, really, really nice. Refactoring, this is awesome. If you've done the lovely global search and replace and went, oh crap, I really screwed that up, revert. That's where you hope source control is working well that day. Then you get some really nice refactoring. We'll look at some of this coming up here. We also have the ability to peek at something, say, what's in this object? What can I get to? And because of the types, I can get more information. And then we can find references. How many people or components are calling this particular function, for example? And we'll take a look at that here. So let me jump real quick into the editor. And so I have, this is a service here called data service. And you'll notice this get customers. And I'm just going to, I'll leave what's in there, but I'm going to pretend that we're going to return an observable here. All right, so I'm going to do HTTP dot, and right off the bat, you'll notice I get some really nice code help, and that's nice. What's really cool, though, is if I came up and said, hey, what's HTTP even have in it? What's the overall interface? Well, we can come in, and I can say peak definition, and it'll actually pull up the definition here for that particular type. So I can get information. And again, this is because we get some typing support, and it's able to give us more information about it. And as we get to interfaces in a moment, we'll see this more. I could even come in and say, hey, how many people are calling this particular function, get customers? And so we can come in and, where's he at here? Find all, yeah, there he is. Find all references. And over here to the right, it looks like the customers component is using this one. And obviously it might be used in multiple places. So a lot of really cool, I could go on and on with the tooling, but sadly I promised Dave I wouldn't go too much over. So at least no more than 10 minutes, Dave. No, I'm just kidding. He's like, that's it, we'll pull you off stage. All right, let's talk about interfaces then. This is another secret weapon of TypeScript. Interfaces are a really cool technique that they're not available in JavaScript directly, but they are in TypeScript. And this is one of those, I hear people saying, I want to do ES6, which is great, but if you're going to make the jump to ES6, why not just jump all the way and get some of this really cool support? And this is something that Angular 2 leverages very heavily, actually, throughout the framework. If you're new to interfaces, they're a code contract. And what I mean by a code contract is you're told to build this, but not this. And a lot of times if you set off a developer and say, all right, build this, and they come back and you're like, that's not exactly what I wanted. It's kind of like, why do this? Well, it's kind of like this. You were asked to build this, but you built this. It's close. They both fly, hopefully. But that's kind of like saying in code that is the same as that. And there's a little bit of a difference there. We have to be a little more exact as developers. Well, with interfaces, I can be very specific about what you're supposed to pass me. And so here's an example of an interface. Now you don't have to put the I actually like it. Angular 2 doesn't use that particular prefix. I like it because it differentiates between a class and an interface, but it's kind of an older convention actually. But this is saying that you can have some type that has a first name, a last name, and then an optional, that's what the question mark is, age. Now where would you use this? Well, I'll show you a couple examples that we can really enhance the tooling and our development productivity in a moment, but here's one. All right, we're saying person is of type iCustomer, and if we just do this right here and pass first name of Dave, then we're gonna have a problem. The TypeScript compiler will actually throw an error. You'll know right away that, oops, I'm missing something. So of course, in this case, we have to be more explicit, and we have to say, like, last name. Is also going to be used. Now age, as mentioned, is optional, so we don't have to do that. Now that's a kind of basic example. Let's look at some others here. So right now, this get customers, I showed that a component was referencing it, which is right up here. And if I come into this get customers, and I'm just going to retype subscribe, let me kind of zoom this a little bit. You'll notice I'm getting back an observable of any. Okay, very not helpful at all. I know it's an observable, I can subscribe to it, but that's about all I know there. So what we can do with interfaces, and this will also relate to the next topic I'm going to talk about called generics, is we can come in and use interfaces. And so notice this response here is returning some customers, and I'm going to come back to the return type here in a moment. But at a minimum, if I knew I'm getting back customers, you'll see in my subscribe there when the observable comes back the first time here. Instead of any, I could say iCustomer array. And now we'll get some pretty awesome IntelliSense against this. So if I were to come down now and just put a new line, we'll say customers 0 dot. You'll notice that I get some really nice, that was too good of a zoom there, really nice IntelliSense. As we type there. So, I can't really understate how important this is because, number one, you'll catch issues right up front because if I now start typing things that's not available on that object, I'll start getting red squigglies, the TypeScript compiler throws errors. It's kind of a big deal. So we're going to see interfaces again in just a moment when we talk about the next section here, but that's one of my favorite kind of secret weapons, if you will. Oh, you know what? Actually, I'm going to show you one more. I just realized I was going to show one other. Right now, this particular application, I'll pull it up here, is not real, it's pretty phenomenal UI. I'm going for that clean look, that way nobody gets confused. But if I come back in, the reason is, notice I have a typo here. ng on init, right? Well, it should be ng on init uppercase, but because I didn't catch this, if I go run into the Chrome developer tools here, and this is I think the scariest thing that happens in life to us as developers is that. And you're like, oh, that's lovely, no freaking errors. It's like, come on, give me something to go on. And in this case, there isn't an error. It's just, I didn't type it right. It's called user error or an ID10T error. So what I can do is I can import, and this will be in the style guide and all this, but this on init. Now again, we can use the tools now to right click on this. We can peek, and it says if you're going to use this, you have to have an ng on init of any. Okay, pretty cool. We'll come on down here, and now I can, on this class, implements on init. Except for you might want to spell that right. It won't help you with that, by the way, but I'm sure they're working on it. So notice right off the bat, I get an error. And so I can now catch that I have a problem here. And so the different code snippets, the ones John showed, the ones I have, all of them out there, when we do the class, it'll automatically implement this interface. Now we shouldn't have any typos in there, and hopefully the app, once it refreshes, will actually load some data. We get some data now, and we resolve that error quite easily. All right, so let's go into next secret weapon, and it's generics. This is also very awesome. How many of you actually use generics in another language? Anyone? Okay, quite a few, but not everybody by any means. So generics are a code template, And because this is a secret weapon talk, I of course had to, I'm sure you all do, if you have little kids, roll out the cookie dough and use the cookie cutters. And of course you do probably swords and stuff like that with them. But anyway, if you're doing like cookie dough, and let's say you're just using a knife to cut out the shape you want for like Halloween or something like that, then I think after about the first one or two, you're going to be like, okay, we need a new plan. This is too hard. And so you'll probably get, one of these kind of shapes here, and you'll stamp it, and you can reuse it that way, right? You get a lot of good reuse out of it. So generics can be used in multiple ways. One way is if you had a class that needs to support different types. In other words, sometimes I want to use a number. Sometimes I want to use a string. Sometimes I want to use an array, whatever it may be. Then generics will really help you with this. This is saying I want to make a list of some type. That's what the T is. And you'll notice in the add here, this is the template portion. It's kind of like a mail merge, dear so-and-so. And then you want to pull in dear John, dear Jane, dear whatever. Well, you can do that with this. So to use this guy, it would look like this. You could say new list of iCustomer in this case. That's that interface I showed earlier. And what that's going to do for us now is I can now make a list of number. I can make a list of customer. I can make a list of this, a list of that, whatever I want, and reuse this over and over and over. Now, in the editor, why this is so cool, and you'll see this in a moment, is when I do the add there, notice first name, last name, that adheres to the interface. If I left out first name or last name, we're going to get some errors in the editor. So I'll instantly know I screwed up. For instance, if I add 205, not valid. So you can't do that. So let's take a look at this real quick. So I'm going to come back to my data service here. And right now, the IntelliSense I mentioned, actually, let me go to here, was not phenomenal. When I did .subscribe, it just says observable of any. So it's not that great of IntelliSense. So what I can do is I could say, hey, well, this is returning a customer type. So I could actually cast this, and it would be smart enough to figure it out. But I'm going to be explicit. I'm going to say this returns an observable of iCustomer array, like this. Now, how's that change things? It actually changes a lot. Okay, if anyone's ever been frustrated by, again, working with promises or things like that, it's really easy to get into it and then be like, oh crap, what'd they call that field again? And you got to go look it up, right? Well, with this, now when I come back and I do this get customers here, okay, if I do the subscribe, you'll notice it's telling me, hey, you're getting back a customer array. In this case, an interface, iCustomer array. Very, very cool, because before, when you return any, you get no IntelliSense down here. When I used to have this as any, for instance. And you'll be like really impressed if I do, this dot customers 0 dot. Phenomenal code help, right? Like everybody loves that. Well, let me just undo that actually. By doing this and doing the iCustomer that you see here now and the observable, number one, when you do the subscribe, you'll know exactly what you're going to get to put right here. Number two, because you put that right there, now when you do, again, the customers, you'll see the IntelliSense I showed earlier. So this is an example of not only interfaces, but also generics in action here. And that's exactly what you can do now if you want to be a little more explicit about what you're actually returning. So pretty awesome. Once you get the hang of it, it's like awesome sauce. Like you want to do it everywhere because it's just so much easier now as you're writing your app. All right, so the last secret weapon that is probably one of my favorites, the JavaScript releases nowadays, they're pretty much on a yearly cadence, and they're trying to be anyway. And the browsers out there simply just can't keep up with all this, right? So I think we're always going to be in this mode of leveraging things like TypeScript, because I don't want to work with the lowest common denominator. I want to work with some, cool new fancy stuff. And we can already do that some in Angular today. We can use decorators, for instance, which is part of the upcoming spec. And so when you do @component, @injectable, and some of the other decorators, that's available. But in the future, when TypeScript rolls out in the near future, async await support. This is a new way to work with asynchronous processes. Some of you probably in here have done this in other languages, and it's like phenomenal. It's so much easier now to work with an async type of thing and leverage it. So we're going to be able to do that now, and there is a link here at the bottom if you're interested that you can get to this. There's a nice roadmap of what they're planning. So as a review, we can have type support, excellent tooling, interfaces, generics, and we can leverage the future today. And if you want some code on this, I have a couple links in here. I'm going to give you one link you need to know. You can get to all the slides right now if you'd like. It's right here. And I appreciate you listening, and I hope you are able to leverage some of this stuff with TypeScript in your app. So thanks.